actually encompassed railway lines of both the northern gauge and the southern gauge that decided to convert in 1886. And when that happened, the Louisville and Nashville decision actually encouraged all the southern lines, 13,000 miles of track across the southeast, south of the, much of Virginia, and oddly enough, North Carolina was actually using the 4-foot 8.5-inch gauge, but otherwise, Virginia and the states south of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi were using 5.0, and they all converted in 1886. As one author put it, this is when the South joined the Union in an economic sense. And and then also the fact that narrow gauge railways failed to offer a cost-saving alternative that was expected led to a substantial conversion. Now, I think I'd better be just very quick in talking about the rest of the world. You had the early spread of Stephenson's 4-foot 8.5-inch gauge in much of continental Europe, but at the same time, you had broad gauges being introduced for better performance in a number of areas of Europe, including the Netherlands, Baden, which is a state in southwestern Germany. Then it was a Grand Duchy, I suppose. Germany was unified. Russia brought in an American engineer who recommended and pushed for 5'0". Spain and Portugal, 5'6". Actually, not exactly 5'6". They were usually, it was 2 Spanish yards, 2 Castilian yards, which was close to, but not quite exactly 5'6". Now, in the Netherlands and Baden, they were quickly enveloped by standard gauge lines so they converted. But the thing is that Russia, the Iberian Peninsula, and the Iberian Peninsula developed substantial systems which became costly to convert. And therefore they have kept their very gauges to today. Narrow gauges were introduced for economy, first in Norway. Well, that system didn't last. A number of mountain railways, however, kept narrow gauges, including parts of the Swiss Alps, for example. Okay, the rest of the world. In the 1850s, broad gauges were introduced to several parts, Australia, India, and parts of South America. At the same time, 4'8" 8.5" were introduced to other parts of Australia, South America, and North Africa. And then, from the 1860s on, narrow gauges were introduced into another number of other parts of the world. But 4'8" 8.5" was introduced to both China and Korea. This is Korea being ruled by Japan. Interestingly enough, even though Japan had adopted a narrow gauge for itself. Japan came to regret the adoption of 3'6". They're the most, they became the only industrial economy in the world to have such a narrow gauge as a standard. Some engineers wanted to convert early on, but they couldn't get, the railways were nationalized and the government did not approve a budget for this. However, in ruling Korea, Japan adopted more modern practice. And then later, the Shinkansen, these are Japan's bullet trains, which were introduced in the 1960s. And they actually adopted the 4'8" 8.5" as their gauge. They knew that you couldn't have high-speed trains with 3'6". Okay, so diversity persists today. 3 gauges in Australia, 3 in Argentina, 2 in India, possibly 2 in Pakistan still. Actually, I'm not sure if that's going up today. 2 in Chile, and so forth. So, summing things up, problems and explanations. First is the persistence and dominance of the Stephenson gauge, 4'8" 8.5". It has rarely been promoted as optimal. Since the 1830s, most engineers who have opined on the issue have seen broader gauges as better in terms of both engineering considerations and also business considerations, probability and so forth. The other problem from an economist's point of view is to have diversity within intercommunicating regions. Why don't you standardize from the start, and why was diversity resolved in some cases but not in others? And so pieces of the explanation are, first of all, imperfect early information, both about what the best gauge is and also what the value of standardization would be. Secondly, the conversion costs and also coordination costs and getting people who have to make a joint decision to cooperate in making that decision. That this would tend to inhibit resolution, which is why sometimes when gauges have been resolved, it's been through private companies buying up connecting railways and then converting them. Now, a place like Australia, where the government, where the different states own railways and build railways. Well, you know, you can't have the New South Wales railways buying up the Victoria state railways. That doesn't happen with government railways, but it can happen with private railways. Okay, the issue of the fact that railways are technical systems with interrelated components, the cars and the track. It does no good to, you know, convert the cars piece by piece. You know, first a few cars, later a few more cars, or something like this. Or to convert a few miles here, a few miles there. It very often has to be done all at once, and this can make things more difficult. Actually, with railways, sometimes you can do a few miles here, a few miles there. You know, when basically one common gauge region gradually encroaches upon another as lines on the periphery are converted. But to some extent, decisions have to be made on an all-or-nothing basis. And now to get into some economic jargon here, gauge conversion entails what economists call positive externalities. A positive externality is a benefit that your action gives to somebody else. So a railway line that converts gets some benefit for itself by getting access for its traffic to interconnect with a large common gauge region, but it also gives benefits to all the railways in that larger common gauge region to intercommunicate with the line that's converting. So the converting line bears all the costs of conversion, but doesn't realize all the benefits. Others are getting part of the benefits. And this tends to slow down conversion that might be economically sensible in the sense of having total payoffs bigger than total cost, because the costs are all borne by the converting line, but the benefits go more broadly to other lines as well. And you know, that's partly why, again, why conversion has sometimes happened when one railway line takes over another, in that within the benefits are then within the whole system. The whole system gains when part of the system is converted. And so that sort of you know, commercial factor has sometimes led to conversion. And then this leads to such questions as, well, what are the prospects today? Well, in recent decades, India has been gradually getting rid of its narrow gauge lines and converting to its broad gauge. Australia has been doing away with its 5'3" gauge and converting everything to 4'8½". Prospects within Europe for conversion are a bit more problematic. The Spanish railways have, for 3 or 4 decades now, have sought to get the railway administration, which is owned by the railways are being owned by the government, has sought funds for conversion, but the government has not wanted to put out those funds, which as of 25 years or so ago were being estimated at about $1 billion. I'm not sure what more recent estimates are. So, you know, whether that project is going to move forward or not, I don't know. As some of the Eastern European Russian gauge lines have become members of the European Union, for example, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, there's been some interest in converting those lines to the you know, Western and Central European gauge, but so far at least, there has not been a decision that that's going to be cost effective. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. That's actually an area that I want to be looking at maybe over the coming year or so, is to see what progress has been made or is being made and what the prospects are for the future there. A couple of notes on what I'll call concluding wisdom on how history matters, which is, you know, simply two things. Early choices can have costly later consequences, and sometimes early choices have to be made before the consequences are obvious. You know, we have to adopt, early railways have to make the choice about gauge, but they don't yet know what the technical considerations later on are going to be. And there are plenty of examples in history where some individuals have been particularly foresighted in making choices that have made things better later on. So for example, you see cases where engineers have said, okay, I think a broad gauge would be better than the Stevenson gauge. However, compatibility is more important, and even though the line that I'm building is not yet connecting with the Stevenson gauge network, which is 100 miles away, I think in the future it probably will, so I'm going to adopt the Stevenson gauge. You know, there have been a few people making choices like that. And in fact, there were a few people in Australia who, well, one engineer in particular, who saw the potential problems looming from different gauges being established in different states. So he was saying, okay, even though we've already ordered locomotives from Europe for this gauge, no. Now that New South Wales has foolishly changed its mind from adopting 5'3" to adopting 4'8½", we have to follow their lead because if we want to have a national system instead of having separate railway systems for the different Australian colonies, then we better all adopt this common gauge today. There have been a few people that have been foresighted like that, and sometimes they've been able to get their views across, and sometimes they haven't. So, part of the point is that history might matter in part by problems that can arise, but history can also matter in that people that have particularly good foresight or vision can sometimes make for a future with better consequences. Now, economists, as you know, as you've probably heard, believe in Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand, which in some conditions at least, in some circumstances at least, lead to good outcomes. This perspective says, well, okay, that may be true in cases where the costs and benefits are all obvious. But in cases where choices have to be made before all the relevant considerations are obvious, or at least obvious to everybody, the choices that people make can make a big difference. So whether it's computer operating systems, I'm not sure, maybe a couple of you are old enough like me to remember when Microsoft's MS-DOS operating system had a few technical limitations to it, which something like the Apple system did not at the time, although later those limitations were overcome in different ways. Other considerations like different formats for video recording systems, whether they're videotape systems or more recent DVD systems and so forth. There have been battles over what standard might best be adopted, and commercial interests have intervened. That often enough companies have done what's better for them rather than what's better for the economy as a whole or for consumers as a whole. So the sorts of things that I've been talking about in connection with railway gauge reappeared in other technical contexts as well. And with that, I'll bring this to a conclusion. And I'm afraid I've kept to the allotted 1 hour time or less, but we actually don't have a whole lot of time for questions now before ending at 4:30. But what questions or comments would people like to offer? Yes.
Did you find a lot of later adopters of the railway, like mandated track measurements, so that they wouldn't run into this like experimental phase that like the West had?
Mostly things became obvious to everybody and everybody stopped experimenting at some point. There were sometimes government mandates, but government mandates sometimes helped and sometimes hindered. So for example, I talked about the Great Western Railway of Western Ontario here. This was originally built partly with investment from companies in New York and companies in Michigan. And those companies wanted them to use a standard gauge to begin with. But the Canadian government says, no, we don't want to be, well, actually, there was an important consideration here, which was that the Canadians wanted to establish a national identity. They did not want to simply have the Canadian economy be an appendage to the American economy. So they said, no, we're going to have our gauge, and the Great Western Railway should be part of the Canadian network, not simply an adjunct of the American network. And this was at a time, by the way, when there was no connecting route from the 5-foot 6-inch gauge lines of I guess going, let's see, where to go? Well, from Portland into eastern Canada to Quebec, a bigger part of Montreal, and I think it hadn't yet gotten as far as Toronto, let alone to make a connection with the Great Western Railway. But the Canadian colonial legislature, I think it was at the time, basically prohibited that from happening. Also in Australia, actually the Governor General of Australia could have issued an edict to standardize things from the start, but he, in this case, I think it was a misguided application of laissez-faire, the idea of just letting things be. That led him not to issue such an edict. Part of the complication there was that New South Wales, the first engineer hired by, actually it was a private company in New South Wales, wanted to use 5'3" as his gauge. And because of that, the neighboring states, the other states, the South Australia and Victoria, said, okay, we'll use 5'3" too. And then there was a fight between the New South Wales engineer and his company, and he was fired, and another engineer was hired, and said, nope, we want 4'8.5" here. Meanwhile, Victoria and South Australia, they had started to convince themselves of the advantages of the broader gauge. It was partly a matter, actually, one of those two engineers was Scottish, the other was Irish. They were both stubborn. Let's put it that way. I was giving a talk at the Queen's University in Belfast, Ireland, and I talked about how Australia suffered from a stubborn Irishman and a stubborn Scotsman, and they said, yeah, we know all about that. So, yeah, other questions? Yes?
How long would it take to convert a gauge?
Interesting question. If things are, it depends upon the technology in use. Now, some of these railway lines in the southeast, and I mentioned the South joins the Union in 1886. It actually happened in 2 days, May 31st and June 1st. This was a time period when rails were simply spiked to wooden cross ties. So it was actually relatively easy to pull up spikes and reset them. Now things got complicated at switches and crossings, but so you had to take special care there. But otherwise, it's actually real simple to move things over. Now it did take a few months to convert the vehicles. Most of the locomotives could be brought in 3 or 3.5 inches easily enough, because they were the same designs that were used on both gauges. The locomotive makers were building the same models for use on both systems, and so they could bring the wheels in with no problem. Some of the other cars were a little bit designs to not allow such easy conversion. Some cars had to be junked, although not so many. But they had to take a number of cars out of service for a while beforehand and convert them, so that right after the gauge conversion there'd be a supply of cars ready to go. And then, there was a period of a few months both before and after where not all cars were in service. Nowadays, I'm trying to think about this. In Australia, when they did it. Some of the lines from Adelaide to Melbourne, for example. Oh dear, I wonder that. I'm afraid I don't remember. But they, actually, what was done then, and what has been done other times. For example, what's done in Spain is that they're using, instead of wooden cross ties, they use preformed concrete cross ties, which has settings for where the rails go. And they've been building these cross ties with settings for both gauges, so that they can just, you know, move the rail from one setting, from one part of the time to another. So they've been designing for convertibility in anticipation that this would happen. And something like that has been done in Spain, although, you know, at least at one point, a couple decades ago, they were doing that, but actually the conversions didn't happen. Another complication is that there's been a fair bit of work done in Europe on trains, both locomotives and other cars, that where the wheels can be moved in and out. So the same cars can be used in different, contracted different gauges. They experimented with that in the United States back around 1870 or so, but they couldn't really fix the wheels in place very well in the axle. So it wasn't technically feasible to make it work back then. But nowadays that's actually fairly common. Since 1968, a Spanish firm developed a system for passenger cars in particular going between France and Spain. The wheels could be moved in and out. And some more recent designs have made this concept workable for freight cars and even for locomotives. I'm not quite up to date on what's going on. Yeah.
For the